David Osk says that everything rises and falls on men leading well. When men fail to lead or love well, everyone loses. When men lead with courage, nobility, and kindness, everyone wins. That is quite the statement that David Osk made. And today he is going to share with us his story of his 15-year struggle while spinning his wheels and being completely disillusioned about purpose and joy. What a statement. I love that, David.
Hmm.
Many of you will relate and appreciate his story of success.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
Welcome, David.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. What my pleasure to be here with you, Carol.
David Osk is an entrepreneur with products. Oh, I'm so impressed, David. In over 3,700 retail stores, including the giants, such as the Home Depot and Lowe's. David collaborates closely with Dr. Andy Garrett as the lead coach for the transformative True North Resiliency program. Tell us your story, David.
Oh, well, thank you for that. It's fun when you read someone's highlights, it can seem super glamorous and there are some high points, right? I mean, all of our lives are filled with moments of, when we feel like our triumphs and so on, but we all know that, the path to get there is never straight, and there's a lot of hills to climb, and sometimes those hills are, the man in the mirror. And
Mhm.
so yeah, long story short here, I grew up in a little town, the little town of Glenwood, Minnesota, which was just a fabulous community in central Minnesota. And, my dad was a metal fab guy, mom was a music teacher, and I'm the youngest of three. And I was the one in the family that was, more of the dreamer and so on, and just kind of had my head in the clouds in a lot of ways. And at the same time, I think I realized I blended a bit of a real personal approach to life with regards to relationships and people. I absolutely love people and how we're wired, and
Mhm.
how we interact and that kind of thing. And so moved to Nashville, Tennessee when I was right out of
Mm.
high school, and studied voice at Belmont University. And since then I've cut three records. In fact, yesterday I was standing on the House floor in our state capitol, and I got to sing a song for the House of Representatives, and do the opening prayer, which was really exciting.
Okay. You got to stop right there. I did not know this about you. All right, let's expound that a little bit. Tell me about the music. And then we'll continue with your story later, or however you want to do it. But we
Yeah,
got it. And you're the type of music, the songs, etc. Oh yes,
sure. So,
you're preaching to the choir now, David.
okay, well, it's interesting. There's a lot of people, and not that I mean, nobody, I'll say it this way. I'm not famous. Nobody knows who I am, but I'm super thankful that I get to do some really fascinating things. And, I'll be 52 here in a couple of weeks, and I'm so grateful that I still get to, yeah, sing at a really high level. I've recorded three records. I've sung in probably six countries. I've been on the stage of the Schermerhorn Symphony Center here in Nashville many times, sung backup for a lot of, stars here in Nashville. And in fact, when Andrea Bocelli was here last year, I was asked to sing backup for him. And yeah, I mean, I'm grateful to do music at a pretty high level still. And at the same time, I'm the kind of person who likes to be in my own bed, and I was never I'd never wanted to be the starving artist, in Music City, USA. I've been thankful to have a day job, as it were, and some income security. And, of course, life looks a bit different when you get married and start having kids. So you need to, kind of man up and take your head out of the clouds in a real hurry in some cases. But
Names of
yeah.
the albums. Names of the albums.
So my latest and is called "What a Perfect Day." So my music is largely compared to Andrea Bocelli or Josh Groban.
Okay.
It's kind
Oh,
of
okay.
popra. In fact, it's oddly enough, I literally have a technical issue going on. I had a friend of mine say that he can't find the album on Spotify, so there's something going on with the service that keeps those uploaded. So I need to check
Hmm.
that out. And then most recently, I recorded. Everybody knows the band Journey. I recorded the song Open Arms, but I recorded it in English and Italian.
Oh, wow.
And that's on iTunes and Spotify and so on. And really excited about that. I'm actually working on the full Italian version of that as well.
So the type of music is in one genre or more than one?
It's funny. I would say that the stuff that I record is typically, the popra kind of stuff. And at the same time, I lead worship at our church quite often. And so some people might, know me in the church community, worship community, and some
Hmm.
might know me in the popra, type of venues and so on.
Excellent. All right, continue with your story.
Yeah. So, I moved to Nashville and fell in love with Middle Tennessee. It's a wonderful place to live. I ended up meeting, my wife of almost 27 years, and we've got two adult children. So my daughter is in her first year of college. She's 19 years old. My son Parker is will be 21 here in a few weeks, and he actually just finished an associate's degree, and he started his own small business. And yeah, they're doing great. And yeah, so when you introduced me, right, my main product, I've got a few different irons in the fire, but my main book of business, as it were, is I'm the guy that invented the world's first thermostat guard with a combination lock.
Mm,
And so
tell
we all
us
know,
about that.
yeah. So um, technically, the genesis of it was my brother-in-law's idea. We kind of developed a product together, and the name and I came up with, and so on. And then, but I was actually working for a large telecom chain, that had retail stores for about 17 years, and it was a great time of life. It had flexibility, so I could still do some music and other stuff. And he called me one day and said, "Where do I get a thermostat guard with a combination lock?" He said, "Everybody keeps losing that tiny key." Well, I knew instantly that was such a good idea, because in most retail stores and restaurants and offices and I mean, they're still using thermostat guards because everybody messes around with the thermostat, even in our own homes, right? Everybody wants a different temperature. But of course, it gets really expensive and uncomfortable in a lot of cases. But, the problem though is I knew that was an issue with the lost key situation. So he and I
Hmm.
started looking around, where do we got a stat guard with a combo lock, and nobody made one. So we jumped into business together and yeah, and ran with it. I ended up buying him out a few years later, and then a year after that, got into Home Depot, and 4 years ago, got a different variation into Lowe's, and then I just licensed a new unit to the Lennox Corporation in the Pro channel. So I've got my original Stat Guard Plus is in Home Depot and Lowe's, and then the new version, the Lockbox Pro, is in Granger and HD Supply and SupplyHouse.com, and we're growing that brand as well. So I'm grateful. I've got some margin. I'm also a partner in a data company called Strategy Simple, where we can actually find people that searched for anything yesterday in any zip code and help people with lead generation, which I love that business. That's really fun. And I do a bit of real estate development. Of course, I'm writing my book for dads and do some music too. So I've got a kind of a wide variety of skill sets and desires, and grateful that I get to, explore those.
So you're come a long way since the intro that I gave you.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I didn't,
let's
I don't
talk
want to
about
scare, I don't want to scare anybody off. If you throw the kitchen sink at somebody, they're like, "What the heck is this guy doing?"
no, no, no. I want you to talk about that. So initially I said you said that everything rises and falls on men leading well. When
Yeah.
men fail to lead or love well, everyone loses, and when they lead with courage, etc.,
Yeah.
everyone wins. And that you had a 15-year struggle spinning your wheels. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, all right, Carol, I'm going to jump into the deep end of the pool here, okay?
You betcha.
So, I was, in fact, I'll tell a quick story. I was on a podcast with a clinical psychologist, and she was, asking questions, similar to what we're discussing today. And I told her, I said, there are a few things in this life that we will never hear someone say. And, I kind of had some fun with it. And I said, the first one is, gee, I wish I couldn't play the piano. And another one is, gee, I wish I didn't finish my college degree. And how about this? Gee, I wish my husband or my father didn't lead with such kindness, conviction, and clarity. And you know what I think's fascinating is even as I say that, I'm guessing
Hmm.
that there are listeners, of your show that just got a big lump in their throat, right? Or they had a long sigh. Why? Because the longing of so many hearts is to what? It's to be raised, caused to rise, be raised by a father who saw them,
Hmm.
right? Where you were the object of his delight, where he saw into your soul and your eyes, and he, started to name and validate the things that were woven in you before you were born. We want our deepest desire is to be known and loved, and not in some vague way.
Hmm.
And our biggest fear is to be known and rejected. And so many, right? We see so many families that are just broken up, which is heartbreaking. And sometimes if the father was there, he really wasn't there, right? He wasn't raised either, and it was more about providing and reading the paper or watching TV and checking out.
Hmm.
And and we so I'm making some kind of bold statements, but you know what? If you think about it, you know, I don't care if, what the problem is in our society or in our world. I don't care if it's war or sex trafficking or homelessness, or poverty. When men understand whose image they are made in, right? When they understand
Hmm.
they are a king with a little k, and they've been raised and loved and nurtured, they can get up with a sense of authority, right? They understand who they are authentically
Right.
and not some vague understanding of, any of that stuff. And they have a sense of authority in their lives, and they go kill something and drag it home. They lead their families well. They set the temperature in their home. They protect, they speak into. In fact, there's an iteration of the word man in Hebrew that literally means one who turns chaos into order.
Hmm.
And so just the opposite is true, right? What do we see in our world? We see people, you know, just scrambling for an external identity. They're scrambling to become, someone that the world would applaud. And I suffered from that for years. They're just looking desperately to the point of cutting off body parts at this point for something or someone to tell them that they're beautiful and
Hmm.
valuable. And guess what? Every single bit of that should start in the home. It's the design. And
Right.
and they're wanting to make it up as they go along and reinvent the wheel. And what they're deeply longing for was a father and a mother, for that matter, to say, I love you and you're wonderful. And God made you unique. You're not like your older brother. You're not like your younger brother. Like, so I want to find out all of the beautiful strengths and, convictions and virtues and what gives you goosebumps and all your strengths and how you want to apply those things. Of course, age appropriate. As you get older, so that you have an absolute crystal clear understanding of whose you are and who you are, and you've identified those things, meaning you've written them down so that when you operate in life, you don't walk into a day, a room, a week, or a month or a year with a big question mark inside of you. You've identified, your identity, who God, made you to be, and you're fantastic, right? You actually have been told this is who you are, and it is good. And then you start to operate your life in such a way that is, beautiful and mission oriented, and in advance, right? Because you've predetermined these things, in advance what you're going to say yes and no to, whether it's an obstacle or an opportunity. And what we see right now is, just an absolute, you know, well, I don't be careful how I say this, a crap show, right? When men are takers, men are using women, they're using
Hmm.
drugs, they're using their own, reputation to fill, some need, it is a need, right? And as opposed to what? Can you imagine if every man walked into a room, how about let me back up. How about this? We all know certain people in our lives, right? Certain men, and again, I'm driving home on men because I'm a man and I believe
Hmm.
deeply in this, but we all know certain men that when they walk into a room, the room gets wiser and safer and stronger and more joyful. And then there are certain men that walk into the room and chaos ensues and
Right.
disruption forms and competitiveness takes over, and it's just this me over you type thing. But a real man comes in knowing full well who he is and he's there to serve. And that's the deepest need of our society, and it's the way we were designed to live. But guess what? There- most people were not raised. They were provided for, but there's a big difference between providing for someone and causing them to rise.
So what is the solution? Because a large percentage of people, not just men, want what you are describing,
Yeah,
but
well,
they are damaged and they don't know where to go.
yeah,
So address
yeah,
that.
yeah. So, we go back to the source, and I don't want to get too, obviously I'm a Christian, and I think to some people when you say that they turn out they would just shut the show off immediately because they've been manipulated or hurt by somebody that's wearing a
Right.
Christian t-shirt. But let me tell you what that means to me. You know, the God who made lightning and tigers and hurricanes and tornadoes and koala bears, right? And beautiful little girls that just need their dad to snuggle them and tell them that they're the object of his delight. That guy, that God, right?
Hmm.
He made you. He made me. And he said, right, Jeremiah, I think was it 3 or whatever it was, and even Psalm 139, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. Like he created us, had us in mind. Our name and our soul was on his mind before we were born. And when he made us, when he made his creation, he said it was good, right? But when he made us, what did he say? You are my inheritance, and I am yours. And so the biggest problem with most people is that they've never been told that. They've never been told that you're made of awesome and that you have you're absolutely priceless. So then we start treating ourselves to the opposite of that, right? Because if you think you're trash or you think your person next
Hmm.
to you is
Right.
trash, you start trashing your own life. And or at the very least, you have a vague understanding about the meaning of life. Therefore, the culture dictates that to you. And in our society, men are told that if you are not Superman, that if you're not just out there killing something and dragging it home and just being all these things, that you're just useless and worthless. And therefore, they just give up early on because they don't believe they have what it takes to do anything because nobody ever raised them. And here we are. So we have to start at the source. We have to, we have got to go back to, we don't need to reinvent anything here. We need to go back to the source as to, like if, I'm sitting here looking at my computer, right? Well, if you want to know what's the value and how this computer works, and you ask the person who made it. Well, the same is true for us. And he was kind enough to write it all down for us. So we can look to see, proof pudding that, he values us so much, and we should value ourselves, and we should value the person next to us. And here's something else. There are clues here with regards to what does that look like to raise somebody and love somebody, right? We were given a fingerprint that's unique. That's an easy one. Or a retina scan, right? That's unique, and a DNA that can never be replicated. So uniqueness, to understanding who you are and who you're not is absolutely vital. In fact, what's one of the worst things that you could say to a young boy? Why can't you be like your older brother? You know what I mean? Like you're not good enough, and you're a hassle. You're putting me out here. Why can't you act like him? Just destroying, that which is, beautiful and good in somebody. So I think that when we're caused to rise, right? When we're raising somebody, well, that means, man, I'm going to see you. I'm going to see the all the beautiful little picadillos that, are written into you, and the things that light you up, and the dent in the universe that you want to have, and the things that break your heart, and the strengths that you have, and how you want to apply those things, and all of that stuff. And I want to get behind that. Whatever you're into, I'm into. Let's do this. That's the message that we long to hear. So I think that in general, can you go back and recreate that? Well, no, but guess what? If a man is wandering through life, and this is my experience, and he's got all these question marks, and he's looking extrinsically, right? He's trying to accomplish a bunch of stuff to become worthwhile, which is a recipe for disaster and exhaustion. If he surrounds himself with the right people, the right men, to walk alongside him and to say, hey, and again, this doesn't need to be weird. It sounds kind of cultish, even as I'm talking about it. But what is it? It's a good buddy. It's a good friend. It's somebody who has an emotional intelligence and a paradigm that can say, hey, dude, I want you to know something. Yesterday, when I saw you interacting with so and so, and you stood your ground, and you shared from your heart, and you were passionate about this one thing, and you did it so humbly and beautifully, and like I just want you to know that was good. Like, please do more of that. Well, what are you doing? You're validating. You're shining a spotlight on
Mhm.
who they are at their deepest, core, and calling that out. That's what we all need. That's what a great friend looks like. It's not just, hey, dude, I love your shoes, which is what most people do, right? So I think that if I could say, what am I doing with my book and website and the whole nine yards, and I want to recreate the status symbol of choice. It's the status symbol of choice is no longer the big house and the BMW that you're paying $900 a month on. The status symbol of choice is I am living a life that is aligned with, the things that I value and what lights me up. And I've surrounded myself with, a band of brothers that are wise, kings, right? They're calling me out when I'm stumbling and goofing up, and they're validating the beauty that was woven into me before the foundation of the world.
Well, you said a lot there, David.
I did.
Yes, you did. One of the things on my YouTube channel that I talk about a lot is seeing yourself as how God sees you.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes everything. It changes our,
Yeah.
so you're addressing that, and I appreciate that very, very much. We're going
Thank
to
you.
take a quick 15-second break, and when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about well, we can talk about your products, of course, your
Yeah.
podcast, and what motivated you. So
Hmm.
we'll be right back.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
Well, David, I really appreciate what you have said so far, and you are speaking to my heart. I know that you are speaking to many hearts out there from both men and women, and I thank you for what you shared.
Mm,
Let's go a little bit deeper now, and any more that you want to share about your book that's going to be coming out, and also your podcast. I want you to tell us about that,
yeah,
and maybe start with what motivated you to do what you are doing.
sure. Yeah. I think that hmm, the motivation I think is quite simple, and I'll sum it up this way. So my favorite quote is by Benjamin Disraeli, former PM of England back in the day, and he says, "The greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own." And and I tell you what, when I first heard that, it was my buddy Dr. Andy Garrett who, shared that with me, and I remember, just getting that. I don't even know, like it's like my heart dropped, and yet I wanted to leap for joy, when I heard that because what motivates me is different than what motivates you and everybody else, right? But for me, I felt like someone jumped inside of me and said, this is the phrase that has encapsulated the way that you're living already. David, you,
Mm,
you are the encourager, you're the great validator, you're
hmm.
the one who sees people and says something. So truth of the matter is I have so many friends who've said, like they never heard their dad say, I love you. Like, what? And of course we've
Oh,
all
I
heard
know.
that, right?
Right,
But
right.
like, are you freaking kidding me? What kind of a man, cannot utter the words, I love you? And it's so common. I actually had talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I'm like, I mean, I don't care how awkward it is, dude. For the
Right.
love of anything, you better hold your kids and squeeze them hard and say, I love you at least 10 times a day. Like, what in the world? So here's the funny thing, though, is I do think, again, if everybody has a different story, right? And I don't want to project, I don't want to assume that everybody sees
Hmm.
life the way I do. I sure hope that I could inspire them and push them over the hill to be able to say things. But guess what? If a father or someone else, at the very least, can start pointing out those beautiful and unique things in their children and those around them, for their wife for that matter, and just saying, "Hey, I really like that." Like, boy, there's a great start, right? So I think that that part of what I'm doing here is opening up a paradigm that just says, this is what love looks like. This is what leadership looks like in the home. This is, by the way, these are the deepest longings of your heart, let alone your children and your wife. And I want to show you, how you can do this very practically. So, with regards to the book, even, yes, there's some, larger macro paradigm type, conversations that go throughout the book and so on, but there's some really practical, takeaways, some implementable things you can do, very quickly to, to start walking into those waters if this is foreign to you. But it's funny. I go back to this idea that most, well, no, all of the men that I know who had a decent relationship with their dad was there, but kind of wasn't. They would say, my dad did things with me. We were together, but I don't really know him, and he doesn't know me. And I feel like, I want
Hmm.
to remind fathers, it's your job. Like, you are the one who's been commanded to set the temperature in your home and in the hearts of your children. Like, if there's something going wrong, or, there's no joy or laughter or love, or, whatever that is, you're supposed to know that that's your job and what it's supposed to look like. And it's okay if you don't, but it's not okay not to do anything. Now that you've been exposed to the fact that there's a third option here, and you have some tools in your belt to start developing that, you need to be about it. And I would love to walk you, into those waters and help you. So
When you
the
share,
yeah. Yeah.
oh, sorry, when you share this with men, how do you address them so that they don't feel guilty?
Yeah, and it's probably a little bit of a balance, right? And even as we're talking, obviously I'm super passionate about this, and it might come across as a bit harsh, but guess what? You know, Truth of the matter is I don't necessarily care. You should feel guilty if you're not doing this stuff.
Good
It's like
answer.
life is hard, get a helmet. Like, but here's the funny thing. I think there's a big difference between someone pointing out, areas of weakness or something and
Hmm.
walking away, and a man who says, "Hey, guess what? I'm like, well, like Jesus, right? Yes, I'm pointing out your problems, but guess what? I'm writing myself into the story so that I can take upon myself your problem. So how about this? David Osk is, yes, I'm pointing out some problems that are the biggest problems in all of life, right? There's nothing else more important than this. And guess what? If you need help, I want to walk with you. So I'm creating a mission. I'm creating a community of people that can, start wading into those weeds and learning, what does this look like? What's a vocabulary? What are some words that I can at least just start using? Or maybe there's one little thing that I could implement every single day that would, cause these things to not be so scary or foreign. So I'm not going anywhere, right? I'm not lobbing grenades and walking away. I'm saying, guess what? I want to blow up your heart. I want to blow up your life that's not working and replace it with something that is identifiable and beautiful and good and courageous and noble and kind so that you can do this with your kids.
And your podcast.
Yeah, so obviously my last name is Ask, A-S-K, like ask, right? You mentioned earlier the lineage. It's funny, it's Norwegian. I actually did one of those DNA tests, and I'm 89% Norwegian, and grew up in Minnesota, and with a bunch of Scandinavians, right? And
I lived
so,
in Minnesota for a
oh,
while.
you
Met
did?
my
Where?
husband in Minneapolis. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay. Did you live near the Twin Cities?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
Minneapolis.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so I, the podcast is called The Ask Experience. And of
Okay.
course, I'm having some fun with my last name, but it's actually quite intentional. And what are we doing? We're asking the right questions in the right progression so that people would remove the question marks, right? I remember when I asked Dr. Andy, I said, "Hey, what's the number one job of a dad as you see it?" He's a clinical psychologist. And of course, his answer was not something I was expecting. And he said, "Oh, it's just to remove as much uncertainty as possible."
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Mm.
"What? What is that? What does that mean?" Well, oh my gosh, the more, right, that I dug into that. Well, if your kids are certain, right, what do they believe? First and foremost, I'm safe, right? If dad's here, I'm safe. If dad's here, I'm wanted. If dad's here, he loves me. If dad's here, he's raising me and correcting me and creating boundaries around everything from education to language to sleep, right? Dad is setting the temperature, he's creating the rules that are causing psychological safety in my heart. And, and as you grow, right, it looks differently, but I love the idea of removing uncertainty. So the Ask Experience podcast is ultimately, it's just removing question marks so that when you start to identify, right, the word identity, all of the things that you believe that are convictions, values, virtues, strengths, goosebumps, all of that stuff that make you you and what you believe about life and eternity, you're removing question marks. And we all know you cannot give away something you don't have. So I'm helping dads understand these concepts, removing question marks so that they can raise their kids.
Well, I hope people are taking notes because you have given us a lot to think about.
Mm.
And if they don't take notes, they're going to have to listen to this more than once, right? I really appreciate that. You have
Yeah.
shared so much, and you have, again, as I mentioned, touched my heart. And is there anything in closing that you would like to share that we already, or that we have not already touched on?
Thank you for asking that. I would just encourage the dads, if you don't know how to do this or if this kind of stuff just scares you, reach out. Like there's no strings attached here. I don't even have the book done. I've got nothing to sell you. But I just want to help you understand, what does it look
Right.
like to love your kids? Like, I mean, like, so you come home and you not only, they have the joy of being loved, but you have the joy of being the man that you were created to be.
Excellent synopsis. Thank you.
Hmm.
And thank you so much, David, for being on Never Ever Give Up Hope.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.